So good day, everyone. Now, this will be our last topic for this midterm. We are now in our week 7 to 9. So it's all about biological factors of the environment and its sampling methods. So in this topic now, we will cover three subtopics. So these are terrestrial vegetation analysis. Second will be the sampling animal terrestrial ecosystem, and of course, the flora and fauna in freshwater ecosystem. We'll talk about the other two. Uh, Maybe on the second video or third video. But first, we will have to talk about the terrestrial vegetation analysis. For a while. Okay. Okay. So, let's now talk about phytosociology. So when you talk about phyto, it deals with plants. When you talk about sociology, it talks about human society. So phytosociology is the science of vegetation. So it's all about classification of plant community and but not concerned with the interaction between vegetation and the environment. So it only deals with floristic structure, development, distribution, and definition of plant communities. So since we involve plants in the society, then we call it phytosociology since we have relationship, no, mutual not the mutual relationship, but a relationship in which that we needed plants, plants needed us, but not all of the time. The plants needed us because they can be um, independent in a way that plants can live without humans, but humans can't live without plants. So for plant ecology, it investigates. Yes, it investigates the reasons for the occurrence of the above features of vegetation, including the biotic and abiotic factors of the habitat, not just plant communities itself. So as you can see in the figures, in the photos, you can see it forested, maybe here is somehow devastated area in the upland maybe. So when you say plant ecology, it examines the relationship of plants with the physical and the biotic environment. So yes, so plants, no, we all know that plants are sessile and photosynthetic organisms. So they must attain their light, water, and nutrients or nutrient resources directly from the environment. So these nutrients now are available through biological and even chemical processes in the soil. So you had that in your biogeochemical cycle, in your NBISI. If you can still review that, basically soil nutrients are coming from the nitrogen and phosphorus, which are naturally occurring. So katong part na nitrogen cycle in which una kay mga lightning that would hit the soil, and eventually it undergoes the process of nitrification, then goes back to the atmosphere by the nitrification of bacteria. So kana siya. So the general purposes of vegetation analysis is first, of course, how do we determine plant communities found in an area? So by doing vegetation analysis, makabalot taon saon na to or unsay mga available na mga species na makita dara ana nga areas. So general purposes of vegetation analysis includes description and mapping purposes. Of course, we know that in certain areas now which are not even disturbed by humans or even reached by humans. So this is baseline information for future ecotourism, maybe, no? Or maybe mapping purposes lang yun nga. We have a rich diversity of plant communities in these areas. So, nana. Or maybe for ecological purposes. So, maybe there are certain species that are endangered or maybe um, critically endangered or maybe rare na mga species in the area. So might as well that this area will be conserved for future purposes. No? So when you say vegetation analysis, it's all about a method to study species, composition, and structure of a plant community. So classification of vegetation analysis according to scale. So in large scale vegetation survey, usually of a new area for description and mapping. So what a baseline information that someone or maybe the society needs to know that there are existing species that which can only be found in their areas maybe. So that's why they map out na, uy, kaniday nga mga particular species can only be found in, let's say, Bukidnon and not in any other areas in the Philippines, for example, no? So for small-scale survey of a restricted area containing different vegetation types, where the objective could either be mapping or ecological purpose. So still the same. So if for example, let's not will limit with barangay, let's say Gango. So and siya area will be for ecological purposes that there are certain species of these plants that are available or that are only present in the particular barangay. So, man ang iyang purpose, no? So, for more detailed work after number 2, which might involve comparisons between the different vegetation types, or more detailed work or on individual species found in the whole area. So, maybe when you talk about vegetation analysis now, you will not only limit to certain areas. So, kung for example, bukid na siya, it composed of patagon ba na siya nga bukid or pasaka ba siya nga bukid, no? So, it includes vegetation, highlands, no? Yes, highlands or lowlands. So definitely, there might be presence of species na naa sa taas, na wala sa ubos, sa lowland, or maybe naa sa ubos, wala sa taas, or maybe can be found in lowland but can also be found in the upland. So this is one of the baseline information that shall be given to give an information or background to those certain areas na kanang na ay pwede magamit as a basis for future researches. So there are 2 general types of vegetation sampling study. First is extensive and intensive. So first type, extensive, no, it consists of recognition and description. Yes, recognition and description of major plant associations. So let's say, associate nato ang certain plant. Like for example, not all plants no live in a certain area na kung itanong nimo siya, mutubo gid siya dali. No? We have to consider the soil type, the nutrients, no? Or the plant variety itself, or the plant species itself. So for example, maize corn, mais. So if you have noticed katong mga maisan, kung naamo mga nakita or nalabyan baka ninyo, or those living in the cities, no? So example, kani mga maize corn, they are usually um, they are usually living or ganahan sila sa habitat na what they call this sandy soil type. So more or less the sandy soil type is particularly on the pore sizes, different in pore size, in which na kani silang mga sandy type has larger pore sizes. So which means nga kung butangan siya tubig, dali ra siya mosunok, dali ra siya mawala. So that's why if you can notice nga ang mga mais, bahalag dry na kayo ang ilahang soil, sandy soil type na. So dili ka pa sila mamatay because they are kaning kanang ganahan sila ani nga type or habitat nga, this type of soil. So those are just some types of vegetation, the associations that certain plants can only live in certain conditions. So example, Gimelina, for example. So I don't know if you've noticed that kanabitang have species or maybe grass bakaha near Gimelina tree, wala kayo may makita because there are no vegetation beside a Gimelina tree. It's because sa ilahang seed bitang nga once na matagak na siya, it's very toxic to the soil, so which means it could affect the nutrients of the soil. So that's why nga eventually kung naamang gani mga vegetation dara nearby Gimelina, eventually mamatay ra gyapon sila. It's because of the toxic extract of the Gimelina seed that falls from the Gimelina seed. So example na pud for mahogany, if you ever seen a mahogany tree, dagko kay na sila, no? Then we can identify that this mahogany tree, maybe wala kayo sila tapad ng mga other species. It's because of competition, okay? Because since they are larger in that particular area, then maybe ginakuha na niya ng nutrients sa nearby ni or sa mga neighboring niya mga species. So aside from competition, the extract, kung for example yung duga, may also harm to a lot of animal species. That's why kana may balaan na ninyo siya nga mahogany tree if wala kay makita ng mga species na nagtugpa like mga birds, kay it's very harmful to them ang duga sa kana siya nga mahogany tree. So of course we need to associate certain plant species in the area so that we know what particular plants can only be existing and cannot also exist in that particular area. So mao na siya, no. Tapos next is the detailed listing of their floristic composition. So by knowing the specific composition of composition of particular species, like maybe flowering species, kay para makabalo ta kung unsay mga mo thrive lang dara nga mga particular species na plants or maybe flowering plants. So third is studying their relationships and recording distributions on maps. So by this, maybe siguro in that particular area, let's say upland, or highlands, na ay mga species darang adala agad makita. But maybe with the presence of particular species in the area, it has now been dispersed all over the vegetation or maybe in the whole land area, including lowlands. So kana siya. So dispersion, one of the factors that we need to consider, nga nung daghan sila dari nga area, tapos nawala sila dari nga area, and then dito sa pikas na anapoy presence adto nga mga particular species, then maybe because of the dispersion of seeds that used by other species, no, nga managhan po sila, presence nila. So aside from that, now for example, we could also determine the relationship of particular species, let's say living in the lowland areas, let's say frogs. Na in lowland areas, they are much populated, or kuan sila kanang dominated in an area. But in the upland area, dili na kay sila makita. Ano kaha, maybe sa upland area di ay kay wala, less na kay ang water, and this particular species no need moist area. So definitely they live within or nearby bodies of water. So they need to be moist in order for them to survive. That's how they breathe air through their skin or even their nostrils. So that's how they live. So mo na siya no, the relationship, no? So nakay makita dara nga kani gakanon man pud ni sa frogs, tapos walay presence of frogs dito. So maybe kana na yung mga factors nga ga-affect. So extensive, no? The area is extensive and it considers not only what occur in an area, but ask also why such observed patterns, if any, exists. So another type of vegetation sampling study is the intensive, may deal with all the communities of a specified area or locality, or may treat a particular community in its extent. So also covers restricted and smaller area than extensive type, and also goals are more specific and restrictive, which may be scientific, economic, or both. So kaning intensive deals specific lang, so more gamay lang siya scope. Kung ato siyang i-layman's term, it's just a small scale na it only specifies certain area or locality na pwede gapon in a way that it can be it can also include plant association in certain areas na the presence of the particular area is present dara nga area. It's because na apoy presence ani, maybe they have mutual relationship, that's why makita pod siya duol sa ani nga species. So those are just examples of intensive type of vegetation sampling study. So now let's move on to the procedure or consideration, the general procedure or considerations in vegetation sampling. First is segmentation of vegetation cover or recognition of entities. So if we can take a look at this. This is what we call the segmentation of vegetation cover. So when we say segmentation, it is the process of dividing a digital image into number of parts of interest. So basically, it's all about digital image. What is map, but some kind of image of this certain location in which it is characterizing a particular area wherein kung asa na siya nga land cover. Like for example, as you can see here, the forest. Now this is the equivalent segmented image of the forest. So ang iyang picture, no, if you can see, nani siya itsura, and even kaning mga water bodies. So definitely kani siyang image, it talks about maybe kaning a certain area here is the water, then definitely the area here is the land. So we don't know. I'm not really familiar with segmentation. So inana siya, where siya na siya particular conversion of image, no, from the original version of that particular area. So there are two techniques included in segmentation. We have the edge-based and the threshold. So in edge-based, the advantage is it is good for images having better contrast between objects, but the disadvantage is it is not suitable for wrong detected or too many edges. For threshold, no, the advantage is it does not require prior information of the image. It is also fast and simple for implementation, while the disadvantage is that it depends on peaks, spatial details are not considered, and highly noise sensitive. So definitely, maybe part ano na siguro aside from image is recording. If we can read this, no, highly noise sensitive, so meaning it can record certain sound. So we don't know. But maybe if you're going on a higher education, maybe this will be introduced or even kanang detailed or explain will be explained to in details. So since medyo kuan pa man ta, introductory, this is just an example of segmentation, what segmentation is. But we will no longer give an in-depth discussion about segmentation because it's sort of kanang kuan na siya, lisod na siya nga part. Okay. Another general procedure we have is the selection of samples in recognized segments. And of course, that's what we had no a while ago na kita ninyo ang segmentation. So meaning there are certain areas that need to be planted or that are kuan or maybe kanang pwede siya mabutangan of vegetation or there are presence of vegetation or dili siya suitable for vegetation, maybe in ana ang kuan segments, no? Segmentation. So another is choosing appropriate size, shape, and number of sample plots, and then decision on what qualitative or quantitative information to record from observation or units in sample plots, and then locating and observing sample plots in the field, and also statistical analysis of observed data, both descriptive and inferential. So now let's have types of data needed in vegetation analysis for ecological purposes. So I'm not sure about your segmentation. Segmentation can be done in GIS maybe. If you want to clarify that, please do sa inyong instructors kang Sir Makalam no on GIS if he's familiar with segmentation of vegetation analysis because maybe he can do that through GIS. So I'm not really sure about that. So okay, going back, no, types of data needed in vegetation analysis for ecological purposes is first, of course, the vegetation data. It consists of qualitative and quantitative. So for qualitative, only the presence is or absence is simply needed, no, in that data. So in qualitative, you need to list all down the species that you've seen or that maybe occurred in that particular area. So kung for example, pugon grass present, so only you'll do checking. So maybe in an area of 1 hectare, so sa kadako ang area sa kugon grass, so inana ang qualitative, no? You only explain or describe what is present in that area or maybe absent in that area, but present in other areas. So it's between comparison, gyapon siya. But there are no certain formulas that are involved, only on the presence or absence. So, and then connection din or interaction or maybe relationship nga nganong naay kugon grass dari or nganong walay kugon grass dari, maybe na overgrazed na because there are presence of cows or goats nearby. So maybe nana. So it's all about qualitative data. So another is the quantitative data, which requires actual measurement. No, it also includes density, dominance, frequency, cover, height, weight. So those are examples of the quantitative data. So we'll have more of that part on the succeeding slides. So before that, let's have another data, no type of data needed in vegetation analysis, the environmental data. So specifically, when you say environmental data, it talks about soil fertility, pH, topography, elevation, temperature, and many more. You know, that affects the growth of that certain species in the area, or maybe affects the presence or the absence of that particular species in the area. So, mao na siya. So, for the purposes of vegetation surveys or sampling and analysis. So basically, the purpose is description and mapping purposes. Aside from, I don't know, we want to know the different species that are present or maybe not, or maybe ka ng mga species that are rare or critically endangered, or maybe kuan ka ng, what do you call this, kaning, aside from rare, it's kuan siya kaning, what do you call that, kanang only makita dara endemic. Yes, that's the term, endemic. So maybe no, aside from that, pwede nimo siya ma-map nga daghan day kaayo endemic dara nga area. So this will be a baseline data or information that this should not be disturbed, since kuan siya kanang na ay mga kuan species that are considered as endangered in that area, maybe rare or even endemic in that area. So no. Aside from that is ecological, which determine the factors both biotic and abiotic that control the occurrence and distribution of plant species. So I've already given an example on that particular purpose about ecological, that maybe the factors in which that they are present in the area is of course abiotic factors. Maybe the nutrients of the soil is not preferable for the particular species, or maybe the presence of the animal species in that area makes it kuan or kanang maglessen ng iyang population because kinakaon siya ani nga animal or something like that. So those are just the purposes of the vegetation survey or sampling and analysis. So why do we take samples, or why do we do sampling? So if we can still remember, samples, they are used in statistical testing when population sizes are too large. So we take samples on that particular area in which kana siya to ang i-take or atong samplingan. So sometimes samples can be used in using stratified random sampling technique, no? This creates different layers or strata. So maybe in that particular area, let's say, paunin mo siya 1 hectare. So out from 20 hectares, 1 hectare lang imong sample, ang isample nimo. So you can always use stratified random sampling. So maybe pila ka meters, or meters in that area. For 1 hectare ang imong gamiton. So kana. So there are two broad kinds of samples. So we have stand and plotless. So basically, why do we do sampling? It is done because you usually cannot gather data from the entire population. That's what I'm telling you, no? na kung ikaw, researcher ka, and you want to do vegetation analysis in a particular area, let's say, na to 100 hectares, you think you can do that alone with that kind of scope, na grabe kataas or grabe kadako ang area. So you need to do sampling in order for you to take part of percentage of that particular land area for you to take a sample. So, muna siya, no? So, basically, kaning stand sample or sample stands is delineated as a definite area on the ground containing a stand of vegetation. So there is no limit on the size or shape. It depends on the purpose, available time, and resources. So basically, if you are a researcher and you don't have any financial support, then definitely you do the sample stands. So, pero it will always depend on the purpose. So why do you do, or why you do that sampling? What for? So maybe kuan lang, i-assess lang yung mga vegetation analysis, or maybe na kay mga particular, like you will be using that for EIA purposes, na environmental impact assessment, in which na siguro kani nga, let's say 20 hectare, tukuran nimo ni siya og building, then tanawon ni mga vegetation analysis nga. Kani, this can be a good source of livelihood for kuan, for the localities nearby that area, in that area. Then definitely dili na siya apilo nimo sa imong pagtukod sa imong building, no? So kana siya, no? Vegetation analysis can also be done in EIA, no? EIA. So we also have the plot plus sampling. So plot plus sampling methods na calculate the average area per tree by measuring distances between points and trees or between trees. So basically, ang plotless is or will be discussed on the succeeding slides. So ang iyang kuan ng ana idea is that naakay dako kaayo, let's say randomly, let's say dili ta magbase sa dako kayo nga tree, but we are only basing to call this particular tree randomly selected by a researcher or by you. So, imuhang buhaton mo na siya ang imuhang kuan, ang imong basis. So, i-measure nimong distance between points of that particular tree na imong gipili. Then, the distance nearby that particular tree will be used as kaning, or will be calculated as the average area per tree nga ma-measure kag distances between the points of your chosen tree to the kuan, kaning distance of the nearby tree na imo sa imong gipili nga tree. So mao na siya, no? So for a while, as have to stop the recording, pause for a while since my laptop is kanang lobat na siya.